up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to have a part 2 of my Almost Vanished series, and this one is about specifically kids who vanished seemingly without a trace and into thin air and suddenly appeared back either days, months, weeks, maybe even years later with either no memory or a crazy story to tell. So I hope you guys enjoyed the last video. It seemed to do really well. You guys love when I do series. Everything I do is pretty much a series, and I haven't touched this one in a while. I also have one on adults as well. Today though, we're focusing on the kids. So let's just get started. So this seeming to vanish into thin air and without a trace, involuntarily, only to return days, hours, weeks, or even months later with bizarre stories to tell. This is a phenomenon that has been happening basically for as long as things like this have been able to be documented, and actually much further before that, since the beginning of time maybe. I like to call this phenomenon almost vanished, and that's pretty much exactly what happens. Many times when the person's missing for so long, their loved ones kind of give up hope, or even in some cases, the person will come back and find they've been declared legally dead. I mean, that's how long some of these people go missing for. I think it would be prudent of us to take a closer look into these almost vanishings and see if we can find some kind of connection and maybe end up with at least a theory on what exactly is going on here. Because as of right now, like, I have no idea. And I know you guys are right with me on there because we've discussed it at length in the comments, through emails, those of you that communicate with me through Facebook. I mean, we have talked about it and we're still trying to figure it out, right? The paranormal world is still trying to figure everything like this out. The problem is there's no commonality except the almost vanishing. As you will see if you watch the almost vanished video I did a couple of months ago, I did one on kids and also one on adults, and you'll see that this spans across generations and cultures all around the world, and it doesn't discriminate at all as to who it chooses, whatever the it is in any of these specific situations. With all that being said though, let's jump right in. The first encounter is pretty vague on details, but I added it because not everyone is as comfortable as someone like me and most of you are in coming forward with their experiences, their abductions, right? These are actually abductions if you think about it. And I think everyone has the right to be heard, considered, and at least taken seriously until there's an actual reason to dismiss or not believe the individual. That's why I tell you guys, send me your stories. I'll tell them for you. And the community is very respectful, at least my community, my subscribers, my friends, my family. So a lot of people don't mind sending the experiences to me or Steve because they trust us with that. And a lot of people haven't even told their parents, their significant other, right? So these are really personal encounters. So this person did not want to give a lot of details, and maybe they were very scared. I think it's a culture thing in this case, just because where it's based on, and that's not a judgment, that's just my opinion. This account takes place in the Middle East, and that's pretty much all we know, as the person doesn't use any real names and also has fictitious names for where the events are occurring as well. Like I said, guys, let's at least give this person a chance here. So he says it happened in a country he's calling Topia, just to protect the integrity of his hometown, as many people there don't believe in such things and would be horrified if they heard something like this was happening, most likely. Who knows the danger this person could be putting themselves in just for daring to mention anything like this, especially publicly, in an online community-based forum for the entire world possibly to see. So he's in Topia, which is a village that's so small, it's kind of reminded me of what we in the United States would call small town USA. Do you know what I mean? It's where everyone knows not only everyone else, but their business as well. There was a boy who I'm going to call Mark, just for the purpose of the story. And Mark was around the age of 12 when this happened and was from a typical middle-class family, the same as every other boy his age and family in that small village that he lived in. Mark's father worked as a nurse and his mother stayed home and cared for the home and the children, a housewife, right? The thing is though, Mark was actually a genius, a child prodigy, and wasn't really anything at all like the other kids in his village. He was especially smart in science and math, and it made the teachers a bit uncomfortable because nobody could understand where a boy like Mark, who came from a very well-liked but also a very average type family, how could he be on the top of his class every single year and do so well in all of his subjects, especially math and science, as I said. And for me, those are the hardest, like English, spelling, grammar, language arts, all that kind of stuff. Though that's my jam. Like, I'm really bad at math, but they say it's one or the other, you know. He excelled in these two, in math and science, beyond description, especially well. The village is so small that the school bus didn't go to anyone's house to pick them up, but had certain pickup points, if you will, like all around the village. It was set up so that each of the kids would have to walk no more than 5 or 6 minutes to get to the nearest pickup point from their homes to catch the bus to school. One day, however, Mark never made it home from school. Of course, his parents were scared and worried beyond belief and decided to call on the bus driver to find out where Mark had gotten off the bus. Had he accidentally gotten off somewhere else? Why would the bus driver allow this? I'm sure all these things were running through their heads, right? Remember, it shouldn't have taken him more than 5 or 6 minutes to walk from the closest pickup point to his house. Also, there would have been a group of kids with him who all met every school day, every single day at the same exact spot to not only catch the bus, but also to get off at the same spot as well. This is when they take their short walk home together, I guess each going their separate way when they had to. After all, as we all used to think we knew, there's safety in numbers, right? Remember the security of thinking that statement was true? We know better now, though, don't we? Okay, anyway, the bus driver explained that Mark had gotten off of the bus at the exact same spot he did and had for the past 8 years he had been going to school. There was nothing strange, odd, or off about him or his appearance or behavior, and the day was just like any other, according to this bus driver. The authorities in the town were alerted and thus began the search for young Mark of Topia. The authorities concluded that Mark had to have gone missing in the short distance from where the bus stopped to his house. Makes sense, right? He must have had to separate from the group of other children somehow and walk alone, but how long would that have really been for? Remember, at the risk of sounding repetitive, the 5 to 6 minute timeline we're working with here, so it must have been during the 2 to 3 minutes he was alone and poof, he's just gone, right? Many search parties started looking for him, but with no luck. There was absolutely no trace of Mark at all. It was like he had gotten off the bus and disappeared into thin air. The person goes on to explain that this was a country in the Middle East and it happened in the 1980s. So when the police gave up their search for Mark after only 2 weeks, no one was surprised and his parents were left heartbroken and the small village was left scared. What had happened to Mark, and could it happen again, but this time to their own children? 3 weeks after Mark had gone missing, though, he reappeared again and went home. He arrived at his house at the exact same time he always would after getting dropped off by the school bus and walking home. He was wearing the same exact clothes he had been wearing the day he vanished. And here's the thing, though. When Mark arrived and walked into his house, his family's reaction startled and concerned him. He had no clue what was going on. Why were they crying hysterically and hugging him as though they hadn't seen him in a while? It was like he thought they hadn't seen him in weeks or something, when in fact, according to Mark and what he remembers, he had just seen them that morning when leaving for school to catch the bus. After his parents explained to him how long he had been missing and everything that had happened and what they had gone through in the past 3 weeks, he was completely dumbfounded. It was not possible, impossible that this happened. What happened to Mark remains a mystery to this day. He was never the same again, though, and he ended up being below average in his intelligence. He kind of lost his genius, if you will. It was almost like something or someone had taken him and either stole his genius, stole his intelligence, right? Or was he just so traumatized in his subconscious for all the memories he blocked out? The cause is unknown, but Mark, I'm sorry to say, was never the same again. He went on to work in an average job after his grades slipped significantly and actually tremendously. They got pretty low. Something, in my opinion, stole his intelligence. Is this what's going on in the woods? You guys know everything I do leads me back to the missing in the woods. So here's the thing. Can we verify this story or prove it's real? No, we can't. But that's the thing when reporting on things like this. You have to go by what you personally believe. I say it in almost every single video, but I'm 100% of the opinion that our experiences shape our ideas and our beliefs. I believe this story, and I believe it's very possible Mark was abducted by aliens. Don't worry though, because you know I'm not going to say something like that and just leave you guys hanging. I'm also working on a series about UFOs and specifically abduction encounters, signs of abductions, the different types of alien races, and the ones most likely to abduct us and why, etc., etc. Rabbit hole, rabbit hole, rabbit hole, rabbit hole. So stay tuned, guys. If you want more on aliens, check out either my video on the Travis Walton abduction or my alien hybrid video, The Truth About Extraterrestrial Alien Hybrids. I was so interested in that. I still am. Can't wait to get part 2 out. That's coming in the coming week or two. Both of those will be linked in the description box below this video, so be sure to check it out. In 1984, in the northern Carpathian Mountains in the country of Romania, there was a 4-year-old boy who disappeared under strange circumstances, only to come back and as an adult tell his story on a popular forum for things just like what happened to him. Here's his story. He was visiting a mountain village and resort area called Vatra Dorne, and I know that I'm not pronouncing that right. Please, please forgive me. I mean no offense. He was with his grandparents, and that particular day was great weather, so he and his grandparents decided to take a walk and explore the village. He explains that to him the day felt almost perfect with birds chirping and the fresh air just had a beautiful spring smell to it. However, when his grandparents wanted to go into one of the local shops, he was insistent he did not want to go with them. He says he has no idea why, still to this day, he was so adamant about not stepping foot inside this particular store, as it was just like every other one in the area. It was like just a regular looking shop. There was nothing special or scary about it. As his grandparents tried to literally drag him kicking and screaming into this store, he decided, with all the wisdom a 4-year-old could possibly muster, to pretend he was a dog and reason to them that dogs aren't allowed inside the stores and therefore he could not go in. He clung as hard as he could to a nearby light pole and actually got down on all fours with his tongue hanging out and panting, perhaps barking too, just to reinstitute the fact in his grandparents' heads that he was, in fact, an actual dog, that they would be in big trouble should they drag him along inside the store. This was a boy who was experiencing actual terror at the thought of this particular and seemingly very normal and regular store. His grandmother, now extremely frustrated, angry, and as the mother of a 3-year-old boy myself, she was most likely extremely irritated. I get it, Grandma, I get it. She stopped trying to drag him and yelled, "Fine, dogs stay where you leave them then," and let the little boy stay where he was, on all fours and clinging to the nearby light pole, pretending to be a dog. As his grandparents walked into the store, the boy, happy to have finally gotten his own way, decided he liked to be a dog and continued on all fours, panting, barking, and rubbing his ears with his pretend paw. He was acting as if he were tied to that pole, right? I can picture this in my head, like my son doing something like this. The man says, quote, "And suddenly I focused into consciousness. I don't know how else to describe a slowly growing sense of recognition, waking up, or wiping off dirty glasses and suddenly seeing properly. I hope that makes sense," end quote. Well, just an aside, it definitely makes sense to me, and I'm sure most of you here who have been with me for a while, or even if this is the first video you clicked on, I think most of us have had an experience just like this at least once, and most likely many more times than that in your lifetime. I know it happens to me all the time, and I actually talk about it and discuss it often with you guys, whether it's in my videos, the live streams, or one-on-one. So anyways, after somehow gaining this mysterious clarity, he suddenly got up and started walking the right way towards something. That's what he says, towards something. He says he walked, and before he even knew what was happening, the shop was about 500 meters, which is 50,000 feet behind him. He was in some sort of daze, but not. Like, he was there, but not there. I don't know how to explain it, and neither did he. It's so hard to explain, but I hope you all are following me here. He says he suddenly realized there were no people at all anywhere. Just before, when he was playing at being a puppy, there were tons of people and crowds all around. It's a tourist spot after all, and a resort town. People everywhere were shopping and seeing the sights, but now, all of a sudden, there was nothing and no one. Not even that spring-scented wind. It wasn't even blowing anymore. He says, quote, "I walked in absolute silence. I suspected that all movement around me had stopped. My mind was working miraculously, effortlessly, and crystal clear. Even at that age, I marveled at that. Since then, I've never reached that level of clearness and concentrated logic, and that is a remarkable thing," end quote. So, while he's walking in this eerie silence, which, by the way, we talk about all the time on this channel, and also Steve and I discuss it a lot as well, right? This happens so much now, especially with things in the woods, such as my Glimmerman encounter and several other encounter stories, which you guys have so generously given to me and or us through email. He says he then looked at his feet as he was walking, and he noticed that he was producing somehow, quote, 6 long shadows in every direction. I was the center of this shadow star, end quote. He started to ask himself where all of this light could possibly be coming from. I mean, to produce 6 shadows. He says there was no sun, moon, or stars, no light whatsoever. Yet, here he was, throwing out shadows. It was strangely dim, and there wasn't a single light source to be seen. What in the world was going on here? Even at 4 years old, I'm pretty sure you know that you don't produce more than 1 shadow. When reminiscing about this day, he says he refers to it as, quote, "behind the curtain or into the hallway of reality," end of quote. He claims that somehow he came into focus and finally started to realize something strange was going on. He was still holding the pole when he came to again. I say come to only for lack of a better word to explain how he was coming out of this strange and unusual trance he was in. He says he felt dazed, and then suddenly his grandfather had him by the shoulders. His grandparents were furious and looked scared, both of them screaming and asking him where he had been and where he had wandered off to. He was incredibly confused. Remember, this is only a toddler of 4 tiny years. He hadn't gone anywhere, really, except for what he now considered to be a trip in his head that lasted about 5 minutes. It seems, though, that he was completely wrong as he came to realize his grandparents had been frantically searching for him for Lord knows how long. People started gathering around, at least 10 of them, as he insisted he had stayed at the pole pretending to be a doggy. The people around were conversing with the grandmother in hushed tones as he heard them all insisting he hadn't been there just a minute ago, and by the way, he is telling this story, although he doesn't state it definitely, he hadn't been there for quite some time. He had been gone for more than 5 minutes that he thought he had been gone for. He thought at this point he had taken a trip in his head. He was extremely sick with symptoms we would know as food poisoning for almost an entire week after this encounter too. Everyone did in fact chalked it up to something he must have eaten. He found it strange his grandparents waited months before they even told his parents what had happened, that they had somehow lost track of him and he refused, in the way they saw it, to tell them where he really was. They thought he just wandered off and just didn't want to tell them, like he was just being difficult. He didn't know where he was. He thought he was in his head. He was never able to make it back to that weird place, and to this day has no idea what in the world happened to him, where he had gone, or why. That's really scary, guys. Think about that. In my opinion, this young man was almost abducted, especially when considering his age. He was a toddler, and as many of you know, I have had my own experience with something we call Glimmer Man, trying to lure my own toddler son into some woods by my house. How did whatever it was cause the mirage? Was he brought into an alternate dimension? Did the grandfather grabbing and shaking him cause the abduction process to be disrupted? Or were the things he was seeing and feeling just planted there while something more terrible and possibly horrific went on? I guess we'll never know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments, all right? Let's discuss. In the summer of 2013, a 2-year-old girl from Newaygo County, Michigan, United States, disappeared from right in front of her family home. Her name was Amber Rose Smith. Her father said he had been watching her play with the family's dogs and had to go to the bathroom. He went inside for just a minute, for just as long as it takes a man to pee, I suppose, which I'm not very sure, but I assume doesn't take very long at all. When he came back out, both Amber and the dogs were missing. She wasn't responding to her name being called, and he couldn't find her anywhere. After about 10 minutes, the dogs came walking back up to him, but they were alone, and little Amber was nowhere to be found. Hundreds of volunteers and people from the community, the proper authorities, and rescue workers all searched for her for hours, but never were able to find even a trace of her. The next day, however, about 2 miles away from her family home where she was last seen, she was found. She was literally standing in the middle of a road that had been walked and searched more than just a few times. She was dazed and unblinking. She seemed to be in a state of absolute shock and terror and horror and was completely disoriented and disheveled. She was only 2, remember, and I'm sure her vocabulary was quite limited, but it was obvious that even if she were able to say what had happened, she actually probably wouldn't have been able to due to her shocked and disoriented state. Extremely low temperatures had come through the area overnight, that night that she went missing, so how did she manage to survive this? Not to mention, it said that in order to get to where she was found, she would have had to get through some very thick vegetation and wilderness. Guys, this is scary to me, and the main reason is because of how common this has become. It never ceases to amaze me, though, how often nowadays a toddler or very young child, sometimes ones who can barely even walk on their own, get miles away from where they were last seen and somehow just survive. I'm going to be covering something similar in a future episode of this Almost Vanished Kids series, so stay tuned for that as well. Last time I did kids coming back, almost vanished with crazy stories. This time, none of them have any memory, so we're like going to speculate, which I really love doing. I love hearing your guys' opinions. You go back and forth like, no, it can't be that. That's why I did this video, so we can speculate, we can talk, we can fill in the deets, you know? Anyways, the sheriff said, quote, "It's hard to imagine how a 2.5-year-old could survive that distance through the woods with that kind of temperature. There are some who aren't convinced she walked that entire distance. Maybe she was dropped off. Those are the things we may have to determine in the future," end quote. Guys, I hate to liken everything to UFOs and extraterrestrials, abduction, and hybrid programs. However, the loss of space and time and being completely invisible to those in the world around you is just so baffling and hard to wrap my head around. I cannot for the life of me think of anything more reasonable than those things I just mentioned. If you can, again, please be sure and let me know. I'm dying to know your guys' take on this, seriously, because it's so strange. There are so many stories and encounters just like this that I'm going to cover, and after all, you guys know I can never stop going down rabbit holes or researching a particular subject because I want to know everything. Everything. It's crazy as I'm sitting here typing this. It's Friday night at 8:56 p.m. Eastern Time in the Eastern United States where I live, and I just finished the Campfire Stories live stream with Steve and a lot of you all. As I sit here, there's a long half shadow person just sitting on my bed. It has the top features of a regular shadow person, but its bottom looks like that of like the bottom of a genie just coming out of the lamp, like those little waves. How or why am I not frightened? Oh, believe me, I definitely am. However, I would rather just sit here and keep on typing, pretending that I don't see it. It's hovering to the point where it's almost touching my bed, but not quite, and staring at me. I can not only see it in my peripheral vision, but I can feel it staring at me as well, trying to read my emotions and feed off of my fear. I'm wrapping this up and going to walk right past it and out of my room, but it sucks I gotta sleep in that bed tonight. If I tried to take a picture, it would know I see it and possibly attack. I mean, remember what I said in the first video about lurkers possibly turning into aggressors? Anyways, I just thought I would share that with you all. Not while I'm filming. This was while I was typing on Friday night. I'm filming on Sunday as I always do. That's all I have for you today, guys, on kids who almost vanished and I guess the shadow person on my bed. I know these ones don't have like explanations into where they went like the last one, but that's just the point though. You know, I noticed a trend so far as well, so tell me if you see it from the last video. These little ones who aren't able to tell what had happened seem to disappear without a trace and go into some kind of time warp, while the older kids seem to be able to remember everything, and usually, not always, but usually, they have good memories, or at least memories of peaceful feelings, and then the adults just have the most variety to their encounters. When I did the adults, it was like even more insane than the kids because they have better vocabulary, they're better able to express themselves. Speaking of encounters, please send yours. Any encounters with the supernatural and or paranormal, extraterrestrial, please send to gemmajadeParanormal@gmail.com, and I'll put you in a future video of listener encounters. Okay, guys? Don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it, if you love hanging out with me, if you just enjoyed spending this time with me. I know I always do. Please subscribe if you aren't already and spread the love by sharing. Guys, do me a huge favor and check out the description box for some links. Justice for Caleb Smith, the 2-hour live stream that Steve and I did on missing persons and mysteries with Caleb's mother, April Arrington. No mother should have to investigate the death of her child. It's ridiculous. We're trying to get some justice. We are going to do a podcast. Everything's just crazy right now for all three of us, for myself, Steve, and April, but we want justice for Caleb Smith. We want to get her, first and foremost, a private investigator to, you know, investigate. She shouldn't have to be doing it. Sorry if you can hear fireworks. It is the 4th of July. It's our Independence Day here in America. Also in the description box, there will be links to the 3 live streams I do every week. Sunday night, Fireside Chat. It's Stemma in the house, myself and Steve Stockton, from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Wednesday night, Steve Stockton and I again do Real Evil on DeZombified's channel, and that's from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, where we discuss Real Evil. We're on season 2. We're doing the 13 original colonies and their urban legends, even though we might have a few extra episodes, because that's what we do. Moving along, Campfire Stories on Friday nights, again on missing persons and mysteries, and again, it is Stemma from 7 to 8 p.m. Steve and I either interview someone else from the paranormal community, like an author, a writer, another YouTube creator, whatever the person may be, if they're involved in the paranormal community. We've even interviewed subscribers before, people in the live stream. That's what Steve and I like to do, to connect with you guys. That's the whole point for us. But recently, we've been reading Me from the book that I just wrote that I'm going to hand in, The Missing and the Fae Theory. If you heard any of those 3 videos on Steve's channel on missing persons and mysteries, I wrote those and I wrote a whole book about it. So anyway, you want to hang out with us for a little while, check out those links for the live streams or come in live. You can see the times in the description box. Also, PayPal and Patreon information will be in there as well if anyone wants to make a financial donation to the channel. Guys, I love you and appreciate you so, so much. You don't even know. Have your best day. Have your best night. Smile at a stranger. Be kind to each other. Always choose kind, guys. It doesn't cost anything. It costs nothing to be a nice person, to be a decent person. Always go in grace, and I'll see you guys next time. Love ya. Mwah.